Well, it is Monday morning, and I'm starting a little bit late here today. Just trying to get things set up, sort of, and being a little lazy because it's Monday morning. Continuing to work on the Apollo, this thing, the multi-level Apollo stack, okay, which includes the space for the lunar excursion module, which I have not even come close to starting yet inside its fairing, the service module, which I'm working on now, the escape tower, which is like 80% finished, and the command module, which will be last. Okay. And we've got these really kind of bizarre instructions. They're very different than the ones I used to get when I was a little kid. Just it took me a while to figure out what these sequential numbers and things meant, but gradually figured it out. And so, yeah, this stuff here, steps 1 through 5, are the escape tower, and I'm skipping over the command module, all of this, and working on the service module. And what I worked on Friday was painting and assembling these components, which are the fuel cell and the oxygen tank and the hydrogen tank and the fuel tank and the rocket nozzle or the service module. And I found these pieces for the interior of the service module, and maybe I'll get around to prepping them today, but what I am going to do on the plan, this is the plan, is to finish assembling the fuel cells, because I got these two done, but I didn't finish that at the end of Friday. And then beginning the tedious process of getting rid of the seams on the fuel tank and the rocket nozzle. And you'll see that a little bit later. So tedious sanding. So there's a little assembly that gets started first, and then that part will be done. And then working on these seams to try to make the seams disappear, because it would be unseemly to have a model like this with seams all over it. Speaking of seams, this is nearly done. There's lots of seams on as you can see with all the bits that needed to be put together. There's lots of seams on the escape tower, and there's still a couple that are kind of showing even after priming. And so I'm going to work on those a little bit before doing the final painting of this bit here. You'll see it later, probably in the stream, and the trellis, the framework trellis that it rests on. But yeah, that's the plan for today. We'll pull this over. Here are parts. In here are the two that I finished. I think it came out okay. This is the hydrogen tank, and these, they're adhering. That's good. These are the oxygen tanks. Okay. Those came out kind of okay. This thing here are the rocket nozzles for the escape launch tower. I'm going to rotate this because every time I bump that, I'm afraid it's going to break. These are rubber bands that are in the way. This is the sticky tack that I couldn't find when I was supposed to be priming the tower. I'm staring over here at, it's just a mess. It just keeps getting messier and messier as time goes on instead of getting neater. Anyway, I need this later for the escape tower. It has tiny little prongs, teeny tiny little prongs that I hope I don't break. I'm going to embed them in here on a piece of cardboard template that I'm going to use to hold it while I prime it, and then after the priming is done, paint it. Yeah, and this is this, and you can see it came out pretty well. Um, I don't think most of these they show through the primer a little bit, but there's still some seams right here where I was too cautious in sanding around these. There's little raised marks on the surface, and I'm going to play around with that a little bit just to see if I can't make them go away completely. It's going to be painted gloss, so flaws are going to show. And I'm happy about. Yeah, the seam here, I'm catching it with my fingernail, which means that it's like a raised surface. So that's going to show if I run a fingernail across it. Okay, it's not supposed to not supposed to feel anything, but right about here, I'm getting it. So I'm going to do some probably a little more sanding on this as well. And then these are exhaust nozzles for rockets here and here. They need to be painted flat black. And I might paint those. And before that, I'm going to test to see whether I can, because this is going to be spray painted. I don't want to get the paint in here. And I'm not sure I want to paint it after the final coat is on, because if I like slip and get some on the surface, I can't fix it. So I'm going to see if it's possible to tape it along the edge on the inside and get a nice clean line. I'm not sure. So anyway, this is taking way too long, but I want it to look good, so it'll continue to take too long. These are doors. These are going to be a pain. I've been saying it every time I pick one up. Okay. They have like no attachment points, tiniest little attachment points here and here, and the doors open like that. I mean, when they're closed, it's fine, but like that, when they're closed, but then they open to reveal this little bit of a rocket motor here that's covered in tape. So I'm going to have to get those. It's going to be really fragile, right? Those need to be cemented on. Even hold them, much less. Yeah, really. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, that'll be an interesting study in eye-hand adhesive coordination. And those have to be put on after they're painted, which means that there's paint in the contact points because that's just the way it is. Should just leave them closed, shouldn't I? But the model cover picture shows them open. Anyway, yeah, that'll probably take the better part of half a stream just to figure out how to get those on. But in the interim, making some room here for parts, making room for the fuel cells to go there. And those are here. This is the base, and these are the fuel cells, and these come out and get cemented in there. And that should be pretty straightforward, hopefully. These are these bits of cardboard with two-sided tape I used to hold the pieces while I painted them. These are the beasts that have seams, many seams that I need to see the seam. That seam that's on there needs to disappear on both sides. Same thing with the rocket motor, and maybe even the inside. We'll see. Yeah. Who came back? Hi, I haven't seen you in like 4 streams. And so I haven't been doing flipping either because nobody's been asking for it. But now that you have, let's see. Yeah, I can waste more time by doing flips rather than doing anything purposeful. Here, I'm going to flip this. That says paint, no paint, paint, no paint, paint, paint. 50-50. Oh, my chat screen disappeared. Let me see if I can find it. No, it was here last Friday. My large print chat screen was there, but now it's not. Yeah, I do. I keep flipping you off, so you just get upset and quit. But then you ask me to flip, so I'm confused. Yeah, look at that. Huh. It's not there. I'm looking at where the chat screen should be, and it's not there. And when I call up, what is this? I don't even know what that is. Something else started up. There's always something that doesn't work. So if anybody wants to chat today, I'm going to have to like get up and go way over here. Yeah, go way up there to look at the tiny, tiny little print on the fine print chat screen. Yeah, I probably should have checked that before I started, but I thought things were working, but that one wasn't. Oh well, maybe after break we can get it going again. Yeah, the other thing is you'll notice that the music is still not playing because we still have not resolved, or I can't say we haven't resolved, but the issue with Nakarada's music, as far as I know, has not been resolved. And so as a result, we're not playing music, which is too bad because it's nice to have that in the background, especially because otherwise I just ramble on, and that can get pretty tedious. Yeah, let's do some assembly. I'm going to do assembling here. The fuel cells come off the tape that was holding them on while they were being painted. Obviously metallicized. They're aluminum colored, and this is dark aluminium colored. And the way this works is they go in like this. Just like, I mean, assembly is pretty simple, except I'm knocking everything over. Wow, this is a day, isn't it? Knocking things over already. Yes, I'm going to use. I think I'm going to use this applicator. Get the cement just kind of sparingly a contact point where the one meets the other. Hopefully it'll work. This liquid cement is way different than the tube cement I used when I was a kid. One is that the tube cement was just a huge mess constantly because it was gel-like and would rapidly, very rapidly stiffen and form spider webby things. And there were model cement spider webby things everywhere. And whenever they touched the plastic, they dissolved it and left streaky marks. And anyway, it was awful. This is much easier, much better to use because the application is much more precise. Unfortunately, it's sort of transparent, which means I can't really see it. Okay, that didn't go in. There we go. Hopefully I got enough on there so that it will adhere. Yeah, it's all sticking. Okay, so that's the third and final internal component, not the third and final. This is the fourth and final large internal component that's of the service module. There are some tiny components that go on later that get installed, but I'm not going to get to those today. So I'm going to set this aside and didn't spill or get it on anything, and put this. You should nicely evenly seated there. Yeah, they look okay. Put this in the box. Oh, nope, that didn't work. Apparently there was not enough cement on the right place. So I need to, start over here. This in the box. Finished parts or mostly finished parts. There it is. I did something. Something got done today. Now I get to move these. I don't know, these might be useful later. Salvaged cardboard scraps, or else I'll just toss them. Not deciding yet. That brings us to the tedious part of the sorry. I have to apologize right off that my chat screen is not working. Hi, Ollie. Thanks for dropping in. I have to get really close to the chat screen here because all I've got is my tiny bit. Oh, stressed out? No, I am really thrilled. I would love to have more followers, and that was great. I think a couple of people joined in, so I hope they enjoyed whatever it was that the bits of it that they saw. I actually was doing some painting last week Friday, so they got to see an unusual event, which was relaxing painting with Dyson Dungeons. Today, I'm going to do tedious sanding and filing as I make an effort to get rid of the seams on the fuel tank of the service module and the rocket nozzle, the engine nozzle. These were cemented together and hopefully will stay together as I plug away at them. So I'm going to do some, since some of the seams are pretty big, I'm going to do some really gentle filing first, and then reach into my box O half-used sandpaper, and then go behind me into the sandpaper drawer and pull out. I don't know why I don't just leave it out. I'm going to get it now. I have this pile of really nice sandpaper that goes all the way from like 150 grit for really grippy sanding to 600 to 800 to 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000. I mean, if I really, really want to polish something, I can use this. I've been mainly using the 600 and the 1 and 2,000s. And there's a 1,500 too. Anyway, this is a really cool pack of stuff because it included all of those grits and easy to use sizes. The only complaint I have it is that they fill up real quickly. But I want to thank you for actually bringing your friends over, because the more people who get to know about relaxing painting with Dice and Dungeons, the better, and the more I can even talk about the more I can even talk about Dice and Dungeons D&D show. Sorry, this is really awkward, but yeah, but my large print chat screen, which was working really well on Friday, decided not to work at all today. And I fiddled around a little bit and was not able to get it working, so it's not working. Anyway, I don't like to use the file very much because it leaves gouges, file marks, but some of this is pretty high. I mean, there's a pretty big seam here. The seam on this is kind of weird. The seam on this is caused by the two halves being different thicknesses. This half, I don't know if you can see it, this half is thicker than the half, and so it protrudes up on either side. Usually if there's a seam, it's because they're out of alignment, and so like this side might be high on this side and low on this side and vice versa. But in this case, this side is high on both sides because it's thicker. Yay. Injection molding. Really, really light filing here to try to get it down pretty close before I start using the sandpaper. The thing that happens too with this is that you end up, there's always just a little bit of flat spotting that one ends up with. But I don't know. I'm not skilled enough to avoid that. It would really be good to have the chat screen working, especially since Ole's on. But thank you for bringing your friends in, and have your friends bring their friends in, and have everybody watch the Dungeons and Dragons show presented by Dice and Dungeons, which is a really cool thing. So yeah, Ole, you know that when you sanded your table, your D&D playing table, for like 300 hours or so, and then cut it down to maybe 45 seconds of actual streaming content, which was an amazing editing job. You don't get that luxury here. It's if I spend 2.5 hours of filing and sanding, that's what you get. But eventually, I can start to feel it already. Eventually, the seam pretty much goes away, which is what I'm aiming for. So let's see what I've got here. Let's throw this stuff out. There's my sanding block. Then I'm going to start. Well, I got a chunk of this. We'll see if it's still working. See what I mean? It clogs up right away. In this case, yeah, this is one of those situations. I don't know if you can see it. On this side of the seam, it's kind of dull, and then right along the seam here, it's shiny. Can you get that? That that's a really good clue for me, because when they are the same matte color, matte, not shiny on both sides, that means that I've got the seam sanded down and that they're matching. The plastic is fairly soft, and so it disappears quickly. There's like a little divot here. There is. There's just a spot here, right there, on that side, where it divots down. And to sand that out would create a low spot. I'm wondering if that might be worth trying to fill in. As I'm doing the sanding, one thing I realized with the submarine when I did the hull, when I filled in some seams in the hull and then sanded them down, is that the sanding creates a different surface texture than the original. And so when I do the final polishing of this, I'm going to sand the entire thing. Do the awkward looking at the chat screen again here. Yeah, actually, I kind of like sanding, because I know it's slow and kind of tedious and all of that, but it, like you said, you see the results of it, and the results of it they're always good, right? The surface changes. It's like with wood, especially. You start with this rough piece of wood, and then all of a sudden the grain jumps out, and you feel it, and it's perfectly smooth. It's really, the results are cool. So with this, it's pretty much, it comes down to just not just making sure one does enough, but not too much. In this case, it's being helped by the shiny surface of the lower part. Like I said, when that disappears along the seam, that means that I've got it, that I've got it right. Use a little coarser sandpaper here to make it go more quickly, but this isn't a race. Not a race. I remind myself. Well, we don't need to be doing it over that and getting plastic dust on everything. Probably really don't need to do that. I don't know why I'm being so, what should I say, parsimonious with the sandpaper. Not like I couldn't get more if I wanted it or needed it. Goes back to when I was a kid. I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. If you wonder why sometimes I do things the way I do, is as a kid growing up, I don't know if we didn't have money or if my dad just didn't like to spend money. I think it was mainly that he grew up as a depression kid, and just like if you had it, you held on to it because whatever, yeah. So, I got indulged a little bit, like they would let me buy, or they would buy for me model kits to put together. That's why I did some modeling. Not like, I'm building models, not being a model. Sometimes you have to be sure not to get too literal, right? Anyway, yeah. So there was always this sense of if you used it up, you couldn't get it again. Which was kind of silly in a way, but that's the kind of environment. And so, yeah, so they just keep using these little scraps of sandpaper until they're useless because of that. Just an old habit that dies hard. There's more chat going on that I'm not part of because I can't see it. I'm going to have to bring tech support down here during the break and get my chat screen working. I'm going to look one more time to see what's going on. Okay. Thanks for dropping in, Ole. And drive careful. I don't know how he does it. Kids going to soccer practice, skating. And then doing modeling in an ongoing stream. And then occasionally probably eating and sleeping. I'm not really sure if that actually happens. But I have to admire their stamina. Anyway, catch their stream. Catch Ollie's stream because he does really, really good modeling work, really amazing stuff. This is getting really close to being done. This is like 1/4 of it. This is one end of one side. And I can tell it's close to being done because that shininess that I talked about on one side of the stream is disappearing. And you can still see the seam. Okay? You can still see the seam, but it's not going to show. It's just a discoloration, really. Except for this little divot right here. I'm reluctant to totally sand out because it will create a divot in the cylinder. The 600 grit sandpaper seems to be working pretty well. I might get some of the 800 out. That was working okay too, without cutting in quite as much. And like I said, I'm going to just rub this entire thing down pretty thoroughly with the 2000 grit so that it has the same surface texture all the way around. Otherwise the seam side will show differently than the on-seam sides. even after priming. Okay, so there's just this tiniest little bit of a flaw on this side of a divot. And I don't know. I could put it in the back maybe, or off to the side, but I'm thinking I might fill it in. I might try to do it to fill it in. So it disappears. We'll see how the rest of this goes. That was one half of one side of a seam. So good news so far is that this thing stayed together. It hasn't broken in half. So the cement is holding. That's good. I'm just trying to get the light right so I can see the shininess on one side of the seam, so I know when I've got it down. So this is the easy one of the two. The other one is the rocket nozzle, and that'll be harder because it's got these ridges around it. You have to be sanding that part, but not sanding the ridges off, right? So that'll be even more tedious because I need to be more cautious. So and then this whole thing gets painted aluminium, and I really should airbrush it, but I don't do that because I can't do it right. I get paint everywhere, except really on the surface where I want it. And I just someday, I might have to spend like 3 days practicing with an airbrush with just using water or something to figure out how to get the paint to go from the airbrush onto the surface in a nice, beautiful, uniform way without getting it all over my hands and just a horrible mess. So I don't know why I was such a failure at it, because like something like this should be a 5 minute, get the paint in the airbrush, spray it, clean the airbrush quickly somehow. It should just be a real simple and easy thing to do, but no, I'm a fail. So I'm going to do it with a brush, and hopefully it will come out looking pretty uniform. It'll be a little streaky, but I'm going to paint it vertically so that it's kind of uniformly streaky, if that makes sense. It's just rotating it a little bit. the part that's sanded has more of a matte finish, and the part that is below it has a shiny finish. And I just need to sand it until both sides have the same finish. And that way I know that they are even. It also keeps me, when the shininess disappears, then I know I've got the seam done, and I don't have to sand it too much, because that'll just make it more likely to flat spot it. Getting really close. Over the last, week or two that I've been doing this, and except for when I was gone on my solar eclipse excursion, which was an amazing trip. Got to see it from a ship, which means that it could position itself in a place where there was no clouds. There were a few clouds, but they stayed well away from where the sun was. So we got it full. The eclipse was kind of, in some ways, it was unusual in that the eclipse itself was really very bright. Okay, because the corona is very, very active right now, or at least it was the day of the eclipse. So the corona was extremely bright. So we didn't have any the stars came out kind of a phenomenon. In fact, I found it easier to observe with sunglasses on than without. I mean, during the eclipse itself, you have to use special eclipse glasses before it goes total. Otherwise, you get blinded. That would be bad. But when the thing went total, the corona was actually so active and bright that I was looking at it with sunglasses most of the time. And then there was what looked like a flare. It was actually plasma looping a solar prominence. Huge prominence down on one edge of the sun. Made a big orange spot. It was so obvious everybody saw it. I mean, people, what is that orange spot? What is that? That was a pretty amazing thing. And it was a pretty long eclipse. I think we had, like over 3 minutes of totality from where we were. The one we had seen earlier in Hopkinsville in 2017 had like 2 minutes, maybe a little more than 2 minutes, which was actually fairly long too. There's another one. I mean, there's one almost every year, but the next one that goes over a lot of populated areas is, actually it's not overpopulated areas. It's mainly over the Atlantic Ocean, but it crosses over Spain and then across Iceland and Greenland. And probably the best place to see it would be from the ice sheet in Greenland, but that's, a little bit off the beaten path and hard to get to. So a cool place to see it, if the skies were clear, would be in Reykjavik and the little peninsula that's north of that in Iceland. It does cross over right through the center of Spain. It misses Madrid, but it'd be easy to get to again if you're dealing with clear skies in August of 2026. That's going to be a very short one, though. Totality is just over a minute. So if you watch that one, be prepared. Don't waste any time not looking at it, because it isn't going to last very long. but the sun will still be near its maximum, if not at its maximum. So it should be a really pretty one. Anyway, eclipses are an amazing thing. If you ever have a chance to see one, get your good eclipse glasses, find a spot that isn't clouded over, and enjoy the few minutes of amazingness that you get with an eclipse. There's still just one tiny little bit of shininess there, which indicates that little bit of shininess indicates that there would be a flaw that would show probably through the glossy paint. And then I've got this divot up here I'm not sure what to do with yet. Anyway, yeah, it was kind of tedious sanding, but it yeah, pretty much done on one side. That's the thing about this is that it's another one of those, if you just keep at it, eventually it gets done. In the process, it feels like it'll never get done, but eventually it gets done. Okay. Use this. Need to do the ends of it. You just do those now. Okay. Yeah. So this side came out, I think, okay. I'm just checking it. Feeling it with my fingernail, except for this one spot up here where there is an indentation. So now file out again and very, very carefully and slowly file down these bits here where it was attached to the sprue. Yeah, this is the high end, the high side. So filing it down onto the low side. I get like about 80% of it done with the file. Because this cuts through the plastic really fast. And then go to the sandpaper. There were some people, when at a flight, I think it was actually a regularly scheduled flight, and they just changed the flight path just a little bit to kind of trail along the path of the eclipse. The problem with, the upside of viewing the eclipse from a plane is that you can get above the clouds, so you don't have to worry about cloudiness, right? That's a big upside. The downside is that you've just got these little windows, and you've got little windows on one side, right? They're just on one side, and if you don't happen to be on that side, then your view is not nearly as good because you're facing away from the sun. I am looking for the scissors that I had left out because I knew I was going to use them, and set them down there. There they are. This is the 600 grit sandpaper. And like I said, this cuts pretty quickly. So I'm doing it with light sanding. Okay, just lightly touching it. And using the same approach as last time, as looking at the shiny bit where the surface is shiny. That means that it hasn't been rubbed with the sandpaper. And then I'm going to polish this entire thing with the 2000 grit. It has a fairly uniform surface, right? Right. Anyway, yeah, some people saw it from a plane. We saw it from a ship. Along with, I think there were like at least two, maybe three others right in the same vicinity. Because, that was the spot. About clouds where it was. But it was pretty spectacular. So I remember, speaking of seeing an eclipse from an airplane, is that the supersonic transport, the Concorde, which stopped flying a long time ago because it was extremely expensive to run. And they were getting old, and then one crashed in a tragic accident where there was just there's some sort of junk on the. No, a tire blew. That's right. It was really something. One of the tires blew on takeoff, and the debris got into the engine, and it caught fire and crashed. It was a horrible disaster, and it pretty much ended the use of the Concorde. But while it was still flying, it did an eclipse chase. But because it flies at Mach 2, I mean, it was really fast. It was like it cruised at a speed that matches that of a lot of military fighter jets. Seriously. It was just really kind of an insane thing. But that's what happened in the 60s and 70s. Like the Apollo program and the Concorde, right? These things happened. Can't do those anymore. Not cost effective, I guess. Anyway, it flew fast enough so that it could stay in the path of totality for practically the entire time. And it flew at like 65,000 feet, so it was above any kind of cloud cover, way above it. But it had really, really little tiny windows, and so one had to be on the correct side and then bend down and look up. But that was a pretty cool thing when you think about it, is, being in a passenger jet flying fast enough that you can just stay in the path of totality as it moves across the surface of the Earth. Well, this is sanding down quite slowly. Not getting there. I guess I could have filed it a little further. So yeah, I mean, the 50s and 60s and early 70s, just amazing stuff, space and aeronautics, right? You had the X-15, you had the SR-71, you had all this, the Soviet and U.S. space programs doing just amazing, almost impossible things over very short periods of time. I think part of it was, just it was the sense of mission. It was, we're going to do this. We're not going to do anything that isn't safe. I mean, some things, even military planes at the time weren't terribly safe. But it was, I think the thing was that they didn't overthink it, because the technology, especially computer technology and stuff, was by current standards really primitive. There wasn't any temptation to overdo it. Okay. It's like, no, let's make the computer do this. No, computers can't do that. What we have now, what we had at the time, it wasn't even possible. And so there wasn't this like dominance by software engineers over things that were actually being done. And so things actually got done, right? Because you had what you had and you used what you had to do what you could in terms of, using a computer basically as a calculator, which is what they were. Just a very, very fast calculator. So it wasn't dominated by software engineers who said, oh, my computer can do everything. In which case, then it took forever and was actually pretty vulnerable. Like on the Apollo 13 mission, the one that where one of the tanks in the service module exploded and it lost power and it was almost deadly. Even a lot of the navigation was just done by observation. So I actually think that because we have powerful computing, that it actually slowed us down in terms of innovation. Spending all sorts of time and resources, huge amounts of time and resources on trying to get a computer to do something that people could do more quickly and easily. Billions of dollars to try to get, self-driving cars. I just have to laugh at that. It's like, why? Well, the tech engineers get all excited about us, prevent accidents, and be better than humans, and on and on and on and on. And it turns out that it's, overpromised. So maybe I'm an old curmudgeon, but this is my thing about self-driving cars. Okay. You go to Chicago, in the city, right? Lane markings, sometimes sort of on some of the streets, maybe. But there's a lot of residential streets where it's just like lines of cars on either side. Okay. Lane markings don't exist. Sometimes the traffic lights are in different places at different times. Stop signs are behind trees. Okay. So you go to Chicago, an urban area like that is not gussied up for your cameras and lidars and stuff, So who's going to pay for that, right? Anyway, so you go there, and then you go there at night, and then you turn on the snow. And so I say this: when a self-driving car can navigate around the city streets of Chicago at night in a snowstorm, when that can happen, then I'll say that self-driving cars might have a future. Mm-hmm. And then find a parking spot. Do that. Do that. And get out and shovel it so that you can get your car into it. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's all great fun driving around pretending that you're a self-driving car in Phoenix, where where there isn't any snow and there's hardly ever any rain. Okay. And for some reason, people have invested in clear traffic signals and street lane markings and all of that. Yeah, it's another to do it for real. So, yeah, robo-taxis in Chicago would be great at night in a snowstorm. Show me. So I had another, kind of thing about self-driving cars is one of the cars we have has like lane keeping assistance, right? Assuming that the lanes are marked, assuming that the lanes have clear markings, and has little cameras that can follow along with the lanes and sort of guide you. It'll turn the wheel a little bit and shake it and say, lane departure. Of course, it's pretty annoying because sometimes it signals lane departure when you're not departing. But I was driving on the expressway, moving along, just driving along, and all of a sudden the steering wheel just it wasn't really strong, but it snapped. It just pulled to the left. Just real suddenly. Just so it wasn't self-driving, but it was lane keeping assistance. And what had happened was that some paint had spilled on the highway. That happens, right? They're painting their lane markings, or it's on a truck or something. So this paint had spilled and diagonally across the lane. And the old lane keeping assistants thought that was the lane marker. And it really wanted to drive into the median because that's the direction that those paint spill went. A human driver, none of the human drivers around me were being fooled by the spilled paint. Nope, it was just a paint spill in the middle of the highway, diagonally off to the side. But lane keeping assistants, they were fooled because it was painted like a stripe. So I could just see this whole flotilla of self-driving cars driving themselves off into the median there, one after the other, because that's how you do it. Yep, and that was a big fad. Billions and billions of dollars, basically wasted on something that really wasn't necessary, and doesn't really work that well. And maybe it would work in the right places with the right infrastructure, but again, cities and states are not exactly overflowing with money to do special lane markings for somebody else's self-driving car, right? Use your massive profits to make the roads the way you want them, so that your radar thing can work, or your cameras can work. But that's my rant about that. It was like when it first came out and everybody was hyping it, it was like, no, this isn't going to work. Do the Chicago test. Show me. Dog barking time. Okay, it looks like this is pretty much roughed in. Being any shimmer along the seam lines, so it's time to get the very fine sandpaper out. and polish the whole thing. Well, this has been tedious and fun. So back in the day, when people knew that computers couldn't do everything, they didn't bother trying to get them to do everything and used them for what they did and got things done. Just amazing things that we can't even pull off again today, like supersonic transports or moon landing, right? We're way overthinking it. Way overthinking it. Way over dependent on machines. That's my belief anyway. This is going to be ready for priming. It'll be ready for prime time. I've said that before, and I'll say it again because that's just the thing to say when it's time for priming. That maybe that can be a cliche, right? Well, this one's ready for priming, and then after it's primed, we'll tell whether there's still seams showing or whether there's roughness or irregularity that needs to be retouched. Running around and barking is intentional. Like they're playing run and chase of some sort. And that tiny is really, really annoying. What I'm going to do with that tiny little flaw, probably, excessive, but why not? It gives me a chance to practice too. Is I've got this auto body putty, which of all the things that I've used, of the 4 different fillers that I've used, 2 model plastic putty things, spackling compound, and this auto body putty, the auto body putty is by far the best. It hardens really quickly. So if I put some on now after break, I'll be able to finish it off. Okay, this little divot, this tiny divot you can't see. I can put a little tiny spot of it on there and then sand it down because it hardens really nicely. Spackle hardens, but its surface is soft, and the one plastic putty did not harden at all, and so could not be sanded. Yeah, I want a little. Let's use this. I don't want to dollop it on the work surface. The amount that I need is minuscule. So the complaint people made about this auto body putty is that it hardened too fast, but that I consider to be an advantage for this kind of work. As I want it to harden fast. So that after break, I can come back and sand that down. It'll be red, but after it's primed and painted, it shouldn't show. Well, I had some coffee here. Anyway, that was my old grouch curmudgeon thing about self-driving cars and like way over reliance on technology just because. Oh, we can have a computer can do that. Okay. Well, let's spend 4 years getting the computer to do it when we could have had this thing completed 2 years ago. You know, because we had to sit around waiting for the computer to be able to do it. Unevenness there. I'm just doing this early on. The two halves, of course, don't match, right? Supposed to happen when rubbing against a flat surface is that the high spot goes down and the low spot doesn't go anywhere. Wow. Yeah, that's a huge discontinuity there. That's going to require some major manipulation. That'll be mostly invisible when it's done, but if the two sides are off by like a 64th of an inch, that's pretty serious. So this is going to be much more challenging than the tank because of these ridges, these bands that basically were reinforcement for the nozzle. Okay. Because those have to not be have to not cut them down, get them off. They have to break them or sand them on. Ridges themselves show seams, so those have to be taken care of without making the ridge itself disappear. So there's kind of a raised area. Okay, so when these things were molded, you can see it on the inside. Kind of, it dips down here at the seam. Well, this dip down on the other side is a raise up, so that they weren't flat, but they're convex, raised to a point. Which means that the seam is pretty high up. And it take a fair amount of filing just to get it down to where it can be reasonably sanded. You know, kind of the advantage of that is that it was raised up so it doesn't leave a gap, really, hopefully. Easier to sand and file down than it is to fill in gaps. There's a pretty big ridge there that needs to disappear. But the other one, we're going to get about like 80% of it with the file because it's raised up. Okay, I can file it down without getting into the rest of the surface, at least pretty far, and then use the sandpaper for the rest of it. Yeah, I'm not sure how much it's going to take, but it's going to take a while. So this is just the outside of it. The inside has a seam that's indented like that, and although this is going to be painted flat black, it won't show that much. It really is an indentation. So what I'm planning to do is use I'm going to use the spackle on this, not the auto body putty, because the spackle is easier to sand down. Is I'm going to try to fill that in and then sand it, and I don't know how well that's going to go. What what I'm what I'd really like is to have, and I'll try to manufacture one. Is it has this curved surface, right? Is if I can get like a piece of wood, the end of a popsicle stick maybe, at the same curvature, then I can use it as a spatula to put the stuff in, and then as a sanding block to sand it down later. And I'm not going to get it perfect, but if I can get rid of like 90% of that indentation, or maybe even 3/4 of it, I know it would look better. Okay, so this isn't done, but I'm getting close to that 80% of the ridge on this side filed off. Getting ready for the sanding. Ridges from the sprue. I've said that before. I'm not sure everybody does this, but I like to. Well, actually, I read about it in a modeling magazine, a book. I got a book once that said this is how you're supposed to build models so that they don't look like the models you build when you're a kid. You know, where the seams show and there's glue strings all over everything, and the clear canopy is basically just a muddled mess because the cement got on it and melted it. Okay, and nothing was painted. It was just the decals. Just put it because it was like silver plastic, right? It's supposed to be modeled in aluminum color, but it never was. Anyway, so I don't know, like 30 years ago or something, I said, well, here's a book about how to make models look good. Why not? So I read it, and it talked about how to get rid of seams. Pretty much basically this. what they encouraged was the use of enough model cement to raise it up. It basically create a raised edge like this where the plastic was dissolved and pushed up, because this can be like the raised edge thing fills in the gap so that there isn't a gap, right? And can be relatively easily filed and sanded down without affecting the rest of the detail of the model. It was like, yeah, I tried that once, and a lot of the rivets disappeared on the seam line because, you know, the model is a skill level 2, and I'm like a skill level 0.84. Good day 1.9. So my skill level was not quite at the same as the model level. This model doesn't have a skill level mark grade on it. There's skill level 1, 2, and 3. Skill level 1 is like a snap tight. You know, you just get the pieces and you snap them together. You don't have cement or anything. And you go from that to, oh my God, this, you know, seams that show and need to be sanded, and stuff that should be airbrushed, but you don't know how. You know, the jump between skill level 1 and skill level 2 is immense, just huge. And then occasionally there's a skill level 3 model, and I don't even want to imagine that. I mean, I think that's everything needs to be done under a magnifying glass with non-adhesive tweezers. And that's the only way to even come close to being able to start a skill level 3 model. Okay, so these are filed down to the point now where I probably want to use the sandpaper on it rather than get a whole lot of file marks that have to be sanded out later. So do the sanding. Yeah, I'm not sure how much sanding. It might take quite a while. We'll see. I'm going to use the 600. I'm going to try this 1000 grit on this and see if that works, because the 600 is going to leave marks that have to be taken out later. And then the ridges themselves have to be cleaned up. It's a divot in that. Okay, so the ridges, the bands around the outside, indentations. Okay, I might just put little bits of body filler on those too, because when they're painted metallic, it's really going to show. And it looks like what happens here is that they don't. I'm running my thumbnail over it, and it catches in both directions, which means that there's an indentation there. And it's like on all of them. And maybe I could consider that to be a feature, but I don't think. I mean, like, I could pretend and act as though when those were manufactured, there was like the rings came around and there were 2 semicircles that needed to be attached somewhere, and the attachment point just happens to have a little indentation. Maybe I can get away with it that way. Okay. I'm going to sand it from one direction and then up to the seam, and then the other direction up to the seam. And just getting them so that they join evenly. Okay. When you look at it from the side, there might be an indentation there where the semicircles were joined together. That's my story. And I'm going to stick with it for the moment. At least the cement is holding together. Oh, who joined in? I have to get up close to the screen again because I'm not getting my. Follow painting, yes. I'm going to prime it. I'm using just a regular old, what is it, Tamiya primer. And then gloss over the primer. But I know that the gloss primer wouldn't cover up any of the flaws. I've just seen that already not happen. So the plastic surface needs to be almost flawless. Even with a matte colored paint, there isn't much room for error. No, that's coming out okay. So yeah, all of these are going to get primed with a white primer, and then the nozzle and the fuel tank get painted metallic. I've been shown how to do this like 3 times already. Okay. And, can't remember. Just, it doesn't stick. The chat window is actually coming through Chrome somehow, but I'm not able to get it out of Twitch. But I'm going to be taking a break like in about 20 minutes, and after break or during break, I'm going to find out how to fix it again, and maybe I'll write down the instructions. I'm gonna do some more tedious sanding here for a little bit on this rocket nozzle, which is coming along more quickly and better than I expected. I shouldn't say that because there's a lot to go yet, but it's not terrible. And then before break, I'm going to do a recap of what has been accomplished so far and what I'll be doing later yet today and on Wednesday. But I'm hoping to get these parts ready to be primed so that I can do some relaxing painting on Wednesday. And then I've got some paint on order. I just have to say this. I thought this was a fairly expensive model. At least in the scale at which I usually purchase models, this one was pretty expensive. But I think I spent like 3 or 4 times as much trying to get the right colors of paint. Like this whole thing is painted white. The Apollo is sort of a semi-gloss white. Okay. And so I got 5 different white tones that, spray cans at, amounts each plus shipping. And I got one that'll work. I'm pretty sure it's like a pearl white as opposed to just white, because it, at least on the sample that I sprayed, it'll look good. It might not be authentic in terms of the color of the real Apollo, but I think for a model, it's going to look good. Trying to get the little bits, those little bits right there. Yeah, considering how awful this looked when it started, it's looking like it could end up being not awful. I'm always surprised by that when things turn out to be not awful, because with the submarine, there were many moments of this could really be terrible. Fortunately, most of them passed without it actually becoming terrible, but still, there was great opportunity for that to happen. And the same thing with this model. There's a lot of opportunity for things to not go well. Like the assembly of the lattice work of the trellis, kind of for the escape tower. I'm going to go see what. Your icon next to the chat button. I can barely see the screen. Thank you for that, though. I've got the large print chat on a separate monitor off to the side. I think that's the problem, is I can make it bigger here in Twitch on the screen. But I need to move it over to the other screen so that it doesn't block the view of the stream. Sometimes I really show my age, in terms of computers. It's hard to believe, but back in the day when computers obeyed people and not the other way around, I was a whiz at machine language programming. I mean, this was a time when computer memory was a luxury. I mean, to have any kind of memory in your computer was a huge luxury. And so efficiency in programming, was really of value. And I could get machine language programs that took up like 2/3 the amount of memory space as most other people in my machine language programming classes. And I really liked that. I liked to be able to get the machine to behave the way I wanted to. So I found machine language programming, even though you had to, even sometimes there wasn't even dynamic addressing all the time. Sometimes you had to specify addresses for the storage of, like if you read something in and your machine language program read it in, sometimes had to tell it where to put it and remember the address so that when you wanted to retrieve it, you could retrieve it from the same place. I know it sounds incredibly primitive now, but at the time it was just like, wow, this is really fun to be able to get that kind of detail and control. I worked with these experimental control computers. They were built specifically just to control experimental things like camera shutter. They weren't really camera shutters, but they were shutters that were put in front of lights. So if you wanted to have something flash for like 7 milliseconds, right? You could use the computer to time 7 milliseconds and open and close the shutter so that an image just projected that much. And then there was a reaction time response. So the computer calculated, counted the milliseconds between the opening of the shutter and the response that came through and recorded the response. And that was always a lot of fun to do that. Yep. Yeah, and an assembly microcomputer. The most sophisticated computer I worked on before I decided to become a bureaucrat, because that's where the jobs were. What can I say? I had to get a job doing something at some point. Was a PDP 11. And I can't even remember what PDP stood for, but they were like super huge processing machines. Other than the mainframe that was on campuses, right? There was always like this mainframe that was used. Everybody's little COBOL and Fortran program ran on those overnight. Memory was a drum. God, that was amazing. Yeah, there was this magnetic drum. It was like 4 feet long and 8 inches in diameter. And that was the memory of the mainframe computer. Anyway, yeah, I learned this. But you were right down deep in the assembly language. That's really cool. But now, now people don't even program, right? They've got pre-built subroutines and everything just layered on top of layers. Don't even know what's underneath it. That's why you get bugs in your software, because you don't even know what's underneath it anymore. Just whining about it. So you're still working on that? Yeah. Program data processor. That's what it was. Wow, you've been around long enough to know the PDP. Yeah, the PDP-10 came out, right? And some of those started showing up in some of the labs, laboratories. And then the PDP-11 came out. And then I was actually in experimental psychology. And I should have left that early on and just stuck with programming. But no, I wanted to do science, that kind of thing. You know how that goes. But the PDPs were, anyway, it was a lot of fun programming in the machine language. Kind of missed that. But these little computers we had, they were just kind of scattered around in the labs, and they were just used for, like I was saying, controlling things like shutters and measuring reaction times and stuff. So there were little inputs and outputs. I remember that they had the very first one had half a K of memory. I mean, I don't even know if people can imagine numbers that small anymore, but it had like 512 words, 512 words of memory. So it wasn't half a K really, because it was half a K words. They called it on these little computers that, anyway, yeah, that's how many memory slots basically I had to run the program, collect the data, and store it. And because there wasn't any storage capacity on these computers, the data had to be written onto magnetic tape, basically cassette recorders. That's what people had. And we were able to get the computers to control the cassette recorder. That was pretty clever. Anyway, it was a lot of fun doing that kind of thing. Sorry, I have to keep going up. Yeah, so the custom, it was kind of fun because, like you said, they embedded throughout. Getting a computer to control stuff, and accumulate data and store it. Not just doing arithmetic, but actual experimental control. That was kind of interesting because all of the interfaces when we were doing this, nothing was off the shelf. There was nothing off the shelf. So all of the interfaces, even the cables and everything, had to be like custom made. So if you wanted to record reaction time, it was the only thing off the shelf was the switch that people touched. But that was always a challenge because these little bespoke machines, they were actually built. There was a guy down the hall, Rob Engelke, I still remember his name, who built these things. He just got all these components, and he was brilliant. He built these little machines. Eventually, they were upgraded, and they came with 1,000 words of memory. We didn't even know what to do. What do you do with all of this memory? But yeah, those were the days when everything had to be done efficiently. I have to say that because of that, I miss DOS. Okay, I miss the day when, in order to install a computer game, you had to create a file and copy it in and give it a name and everything. Now you just click on stuff. Why is there an issue here? I can feel something here, but I can't see it where it is. I guess I'll just keep sanding at it a little bit. I'm going to finish this side of the rocket motor, of the rocket nozzle. It's not the motor. The motor is just the nozzle, the exhaust nozzle. The motor is up here, right? So I'm going to finish sanding this side of it. I haven't polished it yet, but I want to get it so that, it's 95, 99% done. Then I'm going to take a break. And my breaks are usually about half an hour, sometimes a little longer. very rarely a little shorter. And then after that, I'm going to come back and finish this. And the other stuff du jour, the things I'm going to work on yet today, are the escape launch tower. This has been primed. The seams still show through the primer. The primer is kind of translucent, but there's still a little bit of flaw here, especially like right up here. There's a little bit of a seam that's kind of showing. Just a weird running my fingernail over it. It's okay here, and then up here, indentation. It's actually a little gap because I can feel it in both directions. I might need to fill that in, and I think I'm going to use the spackle for that. Just run a little bit because there's these little lines. They're really annoying. I should just sand them away. Then I wouldn't have that problem. Okay. There's these little bands that run across the top here that provide a bit of detail that has gotten in the way of effectively closing these seams. Anyway, I'm going to play around with this after break to see if I can't get it to look a little bit better. And then these nozzles on either side, I'm going to practice taping them. The whole thing gets spray painted, but these are supposed to be painted black. And my skill level in painting, I'm not certain enough that I'll be able to paint that without getting it over the edge, that I'll have a nice clean edge when I paint it, if I paint it after I put the gloss coat on. So I'm going to see if it's possible to tape it from the inside to give it a nice clean edge. And if it is, then I'm going to paint it and tape it. If not, I'll have to take my chances in terms of painting skill and getting a nice clean edge. And if I don't, being able to do touch up on glossy paint, ooh, that's a tough thing to do. But just on either side of these little ridges that are in the way, because I didn't sand carefully up, I was afraid of getting rid of the little band there. There's still a seam that's showing. Anyway, I'm going to play around with that some. And then I'm going to finish sanding this and then fill in the inside. Fill in the inside, the seams there so that they're not quite so obvious. And then I might move on to some other little parts for the inside of the service module. There's some tiny little components that need to be primed and painted. So basically attitude control rockets, nozzles, those need to be done. And I might do that. We'll see how this goes. But this is coming along, I'd say, pretty well. I shouldn't have said that. Said I was not feeling anything, but there is. Is that like another indentation? That is. This is a spot where the plastic, instead of rising up, okay, there's just a little spot here where instead of the plastic kind of pushing up, dipped down. And there is, in fact, a tiny little bit of divot there. I'm feeling it in both directions. So the very last thing I'm going to do before the break is put a little bit of auto body filler in there and then come back and sand that down. And that down later, just like this bit here, which is hardening very nicely. So I hope you stick around and come back after the break. I'd really appreciate it if you did. And in the interim, I'm going to try to get my large print chat screen back. To the other monitor over to the side. Okay, so that needs to be sanded, and then the other side I haven't done yet. I had paper towels out and I buried them. Yep. So after break, just a bunch of little stuff yet. Getting this ready to be primed. Getting that ready to be primed. I'm going to work on this thing. This was a real pain to assemble, and it's not perfect, but it's just adequate, and it hasn't fallen apart. So I'm very careful with it. It comes off like that. Okay. Because the model is an interactive active model. The escape tower is supposed to detach after the Apollo gets launched. But in order to prime it and paint it, I have to take it off of this cone, which held it in place during assembly. And I'm going to do that with this sticky tack that I found here. Yeah, that. And then I'm going to prime it and then paint it. And these little bits up here are supposed to be covering. They're supposed to cover the little bitty tips on the top so that they don't get painted, so that they will be clear to be cemented onto the bottom of the escape tower fuel. Everything with this model would work better if I had steadier hands and better eyesight. But, what would be the fun without the challenge? Yeah, so this part 2. Anyway, lots of little bits. Sanding the other half of the rocket motor, doing something with the inside of it, finishing this, doing that, playing with the escape tower to try to get the seam to totally disappear, and if not, I just have to live with what it is. Anyway, I really actually do need to take a break. I will be back in about half an hour, maybe a little more, maybe a little bit less. And hopefully you'll stick with us. And it was interesting chatting with somebody who remembers computers back when they obeyed the people who programmed them. See you in a bit.
Recording tonight.
Okay. I'm back.
And
yeah, thank you. Okay, break is over. I got the 8-step process to get my chat window back. You can pull it up off of Twitch, but I have it on a separate monitor off to the side. So I was able to find out how to isolate it, pop it out. Ooh, that was a thing. It pops out, and then is moved over to a monitor over there, not on the streaming monitor, so that it supposedly works, and it does. And I can almost read it without my glasses. I think over the last 6 or 7 months, my eyesight has been changing again, not for the better. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go back to this one, which had a little bit of a divot in it that I didn't like. And I'm going to get rid of that and then repolish it. In order to do that, I need to find, how can I lose these things? Good grief. My little wonderful piece of balsa wood. I didn't put it anywhere. I'm so baffled. I am baffled by my ability to misplace stuff. And get them in the way, make a mess. My little sanding block. Good. What can I say? It was wrapped up inside the sandpaper. That was just embarrassing. But that's what happens with relaxing painting with Dice and Dungeons, is that sometimes you get to witness the most incredible weird failures of things. So this is hardened really nicely, and it's taking a lot of sanding. I put too much on there. I'm going to use a slightly newer piece of sandpaper. I didn't hurt anything. The worst that can happen is that I'll sand all of it off, and it will be no better than it was before. But as you can see, it's a pretty big block of red, and it needs to turn into a very, very tiny spot of red. It's barely filling in what is a tiny little divot, in the way the plastic was molded. As I was saying about this sandpaper, this stuff I bought is really good, except that it clogs, it fills really fast. As a result, I end up using a lot of it to accomplish relatively little. I'm hoping to accomplish relatively little yet this afternoon. I'm just going to work on the rocket nozzle sanding. I got one side of it done pretty well, I think. The other side is not really started yet. So what you can see here, this is how see the darker bit. The darker bit is the divot. The lighter stuff actually just needs to come off altogether. So I need to worry away at it with the sandpaper until that isn't really there anymore. And then use the 1000 grit to polish the whole thing. You can see that, once this is sanded away, how effective the auto body putty is. It filled that gap really nicely. And it's not a gap anymore. And it was really tiny. It was really tiny. And now hopefully that will just stay there. Okay, but I need to take this stuff and repolish that whole section. So that it matches the surface texture of the rest of it. Okay, that's a problem. I need to be aware of this. This is the auto body putty dissolves the plastic. Damn it. Okay, I can sand that out, but that was unexpected. And now it's going to be an issue there. Like, why is that a rough surface? And yeah, there it is. That's something I need to be aware of as I do this. Yeah, I need to let that set. It's like, okay, well, I might have made a mess trying to fix something. I might have unfixed it. No, it's not good. Unfixing something isn't good. But what yeah. So now I have no good alternatives here, actually. Filling things in. It doesn't seem to be happening here. I'm not sure what happened there. No, I'm just muttering to myself because I'm not sure what's going on. The plastic seemed to have softened. Maybe the same thing is happening here. I'm not sure. And you can see how minuscule the little spot was and how nicely it filled it in. But if it's softening the plastic, then it's changing the texture and it's causing a problem. Okay. Well, what I haven't polished this yet, so that's why I'm seeing a change in the sheen as I go around. Okay. I need to sand this side. Then I'm going to come back to this and find out what's going on here. I'm going to let that harden by just leaving it alone for a while. And by leaving it alone, hopefully it will harden and I can sand it down. Otherwise, that's going to have to be hidden. Yep, sometimes fixing one thing breaks another thing. So when I play around with the escape module, escape tower, when I go back to that to try to fill in those little bits, I am going to use the spackling compound and not the auto body filler, at least for that, until I figure out what was happening here. One of the secrets of not only this is a thing that happens with me. I don't know if it happens with you. It's like when you're polishing something or cleaning something, even cleaning something, there's this tendency to like rub it and then but rub past it so you can see the thing you're rubbing. But as I keep reminding myself when I do that, if you can see it, it's not being scrubbed or rubbed. And so, like this bit here, if I do this so I can see it, the act of not seeing it means that it's not getting sanded, which means missing the point. So as I promised in my headline on this is Tedious Sanding Day. I know it's tedious for you. For me, it's really quite relaxing. I find this kind of thing basically mind numbing. Okay, you just go brain dead doing this, which is at a certain point in time, at a certain age, is kind of like, oh well, that's a lot better than worrying about something. What am I muttering about? So what I should do as I'm continuing to work away at this, just I find the fingernail is like the most effective measuring device I've got in terms of the quality of the surface. Can really feel any imperfections. This is coming along, actually pretty well. I think it's not going to be perfect because it's going to be painted a metallic, and that's going to show any kind of flaws and imperfections, and there will certainly still be some. But they'll be way, way, way less than they were before I did this tedious sanding. To figure out, I can still feel a little something up here, but I can't tell. I think it's just like another little kind of divot, where the plastic is just lower in on both sides. And I'm not going to try to fill that in. I learned my lesson on the fuel tank there. So I've got the rest of the seam to do here. And then I need to, polish it all the way around so that the surface texture is fairly uniform. It's not so much whether it's lossy or not. As long as there aren't any major scratch marks, which there shouldn't be from the fine grit that I'm using, but to make sure that it's uniform all the way around. The parts that are sanded are slightly different than the parts that aren't, even with the polishing sandpaper. And those are the ones I need to catch. That's why I just rub the whole thing down with the same grit sandpaper, just to make sure that when it's painted, it looks pretty uniform. Maybe not perfectly uniform, but pretty nice. So it's pretty nice. Yeah, even the rings are coming out, I think, pretty well. I will have to remember to give this a good cleaning before I prime it, both of these pieces, because they have a lot of sanding dust on them. So I give them a quick alcohol wipe down. I can tell I'm actually removing plastic because there's plastic dust everywhere. My fingers. Okay, well, I've got this one and this one to do yet. Cut off just another piece of this. Oh, look at that, I found my scissors right away. That was kind of a surprise. I'm going to set them down here, over here, instead of there, so that I can't find them when I need them next time. This one is going to take a little bit more work. There was a piece of the sprue on this one, so it's raised up a little higher. There's more plastic to take off. Tell you what the situation is there. And then these get painted metallic. The fuel tank gets painted aluminum, or because it's Viejo paint made in Europe, aluminium. Okay, and that will match the color of the other tanks on the things that I had painted on Friday. And the rocket nozzle, the exhaust nozzle here, gets painted steel, which is a dark color, which is the same color that I used on the rocket nozzles for the escape tower. So these rings that go around it, all of them have a little bit of an opening. They're not, the top has a little bit of an opening all the way around. I mean, each one of them. And I'm just going to say that that's just the way it's going to be. I can't really effectively fill those in, I don't think. So it's going to be, my story is that they were made as semicircles and that they were joined together. And they're pretty, pretty nicely done, except for this, a tiny little bit of a notch. Right on the edge. And that notch is just going to be a feature. Right there is a notch. And that I don't like, because it's right on the end of the cone. And that's where I should use the auto body putty. Afraid if that's dissolving the plastic. Maybe it just didn't harden enough. I'm not sure. See what's going on with this. See, there's just a roughness on the surface now. And this needs to be massively polished out. It's a softness in the surface. That's really kind of a problem. Yeah, I think the putty actually dissolved the plastic a little bit. And it's causing a roughness on the surface, which is like totally the opposite of what I was hoping to accomplish. It's sanding out. I'm using the 600 grit here, and then I'll polish it. It's sanding out, but it would have been better if it hadn't happened at all. But I don't think it's going to be a real problem, but it was a situation that should not have existed. It's this most minuscule little indentation, and it has turned into an issue. You've almost got it out. It just, 10 minutes of something I didn't need to be doing, right? That was just unexpected. I guess probably it's just because I hadn't used it in this fashion before. Yeah, now I'm going to have just a roughness in the surface here. that might not totally disappear. How deep did that go? Oh my, maybe I've got a real problem. Hmm. I think I'm finally getting it, but this is not what I anticipated. It is not what I was planning. Sorry for going quiet. I'm just trying to fix something that should never have existed to begin with. Yep, trying to fix something that shouldn't have been a problem to start. So my reliance on the auto body putty is not going to happen, because what I found is that the solvent dissolves the plastic. And maybe I didn't let it harden long enough. I don't know. Or maybe it was just the way the solvent was mixed in with the body of it. But it turned out to be a problem that now I managed to sand away. But still. Okay, well, that'll do. Okay. There probably aren't any more flaws on this than there were in the original tank. But that was just an annoying pain in the butt. All right. What I need to do now is polish this. Just basically, I'm going to get some really fine sandpaper, and I got the same issue here. Get like 1,000 grit of two. I think the 1,000 grit sandpaper. Maybe the 2,000. grit sandpaper and rub it around the whole thing so that I get a uniform surface texture for the painting, the priming and painting. I'm going to do that first, and then I'm going to try to do some filling in these gaps on the inside with the spackling compound. All of this is like junk paper. I should just get rid of it. So that it's not in the way anymore. What I want is the two stuff. Here I am, definitely not keeping my work surface clear and everything else. Ugh. Okay. So I'm going to do one side and then the other with the 2000. Paying particular attention to the area that was rubbed by the 600, but I want the entire surface to be sanded with the 2000, again, to give it a uniform surface texture. One side and then the other. And then, yeah, I'll have to decide what to attend to next. To get these ready to be primed. Got lots of other things to do. I've got parts to find. I've got things to, anyway, I'm not doing, let's just say it's not happening in the order in which the instructions say to happen, because, just the availability of the paint and whether the parts are prepped or not, whether the seams are showing. As I fall silent, did I make any progress today? Yes, I have. What I did was, let me show what I did. I attached the fuel cells to that section. I got the seams sanded on the fuel tank. I am in the process of, and I set it down so that I can't remember which side I've worked on. I'm in the process of like final sanding and polishing the outside of the rocket nozzle. I did half of it. I set it down. Can't remember which half. Lovely. So I need to do it all over again. And when I've got almost an hour left, I can make more progress. Now I'm sanding this whole thing, not just the seam that I've sanded down, but the whole thing, just to give it the same surface texture all the way around, because otherwise it will show under the paint. I used up a bunch of sandpaper by doing this. I'm consuming resources. Yeah, I need to do a little more filling in of the inside of the rocket motor. A little bit on one of the edges. There's just a stupid little niche. Plastic parts just really are crappy. You know, sometimes you get amazing detail, like on the submarine. This thing was probably like a millimeter in diameter, right? Maybe a millimeter and a half in diameter, but it was a clock face, and the hands and the little spots, you know, the numbers around the outside of the clock face were molded in. And on the other hand, you get like chairs, tiny little chairs that were the size of slightly smaller than the size of a grain of rice, where the two halves of the molds didn't match. And so there's flashing all over them. Just, I don't know. It's like an, you know, inexpensive injection molding. That's what happens. All right, the seams are probably still going to show a little bit. I'm not sure I can get them much better than they are, but they're going to show way, way less than they would have otherwise. Yeah, so this was almost a disaster. That's going to be okay. I'm going to resort to spackle. I need to get a tool. You need a popsicle stick. Be right back. Okay, what I'm going to do with this popsicle stick is the inside of this, okay, is actually that's not bad. That comes pretty close to matching the curvature. I'm going to use this to spatula the stuff into the gap. You know, just hopefully I can unplug it here. Get some of this out. This is wall spackle. And the thing with this is that it dries to a nice, fairly hard surface, okay? But it's soft, and so it might not have exactly the same texture as the rest of the plastic. I'm thinking though that for the most part, the things that I'm doing are either they're going to be painted flat black like this is, where that won't make a big difference, or the seams are so tiny. Okay. Yeah, I put a tiny little hole in the end of this because I didn't want to be getting a lot out at one time, but it's just way too small. Well, something just fell. No, it was the cap for this. This comes out, it comes out pink and dries white. The pink is kind of neat because then you can see where it's going. Some primers, paint primers are like that. Okay, no, it's still, they'll go on pink and dry white. That way you can see where you have painted. This is coming out. Stupid slow. Yeah, there's a bigger opening now. Squeeze out more than enough there. And the cap didn't disappear. This is cool. The cap did not disappear under the workbench. That was a shock. Okay. So this won't be awful, I don't think. What I'm going to do is put a little bit on there and use that with the spatula to put it into the crack, the indentation. Not filling it completely, but it's I think this is going to work. Some of the less that's on there, the easier it is to sand it later. Let's see how that goes. This stuff is fairly soft. I mean, it forms a decent being pink, I can see where it's going and I can clean it up. There it is. This has an indentation in it, so I'm going to put a little bit on the edge here. I'll sand that down later. It'll turn white, and so I won't be able to see it quite as clearly when it's time to sand it. And it's not filling it perfectly. Yeah, the more I mess around with this, the worse it's getting. I need to clean off the end. If the inside surface is a little bit rough textured, I think that'll actually be okay. Because it's just, that's what it is. It's the inside of a rocket nozzle. It's looking messy, but use the clean end. It's better. I want it broad like that. It fills the area. Yeah, I can get a finger in there and sand it. But I think that, it'll just look a lot better than if I left that big valley divot in it. Come on. Can't get there from here. Try to clean a little bit of this up. Minimize the sanding. This will have to sit for a while. And you can tell it's dry because it'll be white, Yeah, I had it. I had it okay, and then I messed it up. Okay. Leave this alone. I'm going to leave that alone now. In my fingers. What I'm going to do next is continue using this. So on this bit here, is right here, the tiniest little bit of seams showing. I'm just going to take some of this and kind of push it down with my finger to try to get it into the seam. It's going to be like minuscule, right? Almost invisible, almost small enough that the paint should fill it in, but it's not. And then I'm going to sand it down with using just a really fine sandpaper. It's getting so little that it's, I can kind of feel it a little bit with my fingernail, but scarcely at all. I think I'm doing stuff that doesn't need to be done here. Well, it's not going to hurt anything. I'll sand it down so that it's smooth, and there may or may not be a tiniest little bit of a seam showing, but it's going to be just essentially invisible. I mean, this whole model is going to turn out to be B plus, A minus kind of thing. So I need to let that dry. I'll sand it down on Wednesday, sand down the inside of this on Wednesday, and then this will be ready, and this will be ready for priming. This is just goo now. The Aqua Body Putty really was disappointing because it unexpectedly dissolved the plastic and didn't harden enough. Maybe I didn't let it sit long enough to reharden, and then it caused a problem. It caused a rough surface. I need to clean my hands a little bit here. get some of the stuff off the workbench before I proceed. Get this out of the way. It's going to be a problem. All of this dead all this dead sandpaper is just distracting. I'm going to get rid of this. I'll be right back and explain what I'm doing next. Okay. On this again, there are these nozzles here and here that need to be painted black, and they need to have an incredibly clean edge around the outside. And if I were really good, I would paint this whole thing just looking at this. The spackle is drying, and that's what I'm feeling. I have to sand this down again. Paint the whole thing the gloss white, the semi-gloss white. Okay. And then I would paint these black, and I would do it so carefully and skillfully that it would be this amazingly clean edge around the outside. Right. I'm not sure I can do that. I might not have an option, but there is one alternative that I want to try. I'm just going to see if this is even possible. I'm going to see whether it's possible to tape the inside of that so that the tape creates, the masking before spraying, right? That I can mask the inside edge. Skillfully enough. To give it a clean line. I don't know if I can, so I'm going to try. I'm going to try by putting the tape on the inside and then pushing it up against the edge. The curvature of it is making it nearly impossible. But it might work. It doesn't need to extend much above the edge. Okay, it doesn't need to extend above the edge really at all. It just needs to mask the edge. And then I need to be able to get the spray paint up to it. That's almost up a little too high. But what I'm discovering here is that this is possible. That by being very patient, it is going to be possible to mask the inside of this in such a way that I can paint it black first. I can paint it black and then mask it, in that the odds are high, not 100%, but high, that the masking tape will cause it to have a very nice, clean edge. it'll take a while. It'll be tedious masking. Okay, tedious masking. But I think the results will be better than if I tried to paint it first. And if it doesn't work, well, then I'm not any worse off than if I freehanded it, am I? I mean, I'm really not any worse off then, because I'll just have to be doing little touch-ups. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it is going to be possible to do this. It'd be possible to do the masking. All right. Because it's going to be possible, I can now paint those. I can paint those black. And then if there are problems with it, I can fix it with the primer, and not have to worry about the final gloss coat. And then once again, the secret to this will be like with the submarine, to display it under somewhat dim light at a distance. Okay, and everything looks better under somewhat dim, slightly indirect lighting at a distance. Definitely not under bright lights with a head magnifier. Definitely not that. Okay. This is in the last half hour of the stream. I'm not going to try to paint this. Okay, I'm not going to try to paint these at the end of a stream. I have learned my lesson many, many times over that attempting to do that near the end of a stream is inviting disaster, because my focus is reduced and something will happen. I'll hit the brush somewhere and make a mess. But what I'm going to do that is I'm going to paint these black, flat black first. Okay, and then tape them to try to get a clean edge when I spray paint this entire thing to glossy white. And hopefully it'll be okay. Otherwise, the escape rocket's looking okay. So this will have to be, this requires a little bit of sanding where I put the spackling on, because the surface is now rough there, but I'll have to remember to do that. Okay. I want to talk about Dice and Dungeons. Dice and Dungeons is primarily a Dungeons and Dragons show, and our show is on Twitch with a live chat on Sundays at 2, 3 Sundays a month. So watch social media for the schedule. I'm playing with little parts and stuff here. Oh, this is a missile. This is one of the Polaris missiles from the submarine kit. There are 2 of them, and this is the extra, which is still in here because I don't have any other place to put it at the moment. So yes, you should catch our show. It's really, really good. It is a good show. I have to say that, even though I'm part of it. Watch it. You'll have fun. It will be cool. You can catch past episodes on YouTube, and you can listen to them as a podcast. So I'd encourage everybody to do that. This relaxing painting with Dice and Dungeons started out painting minifigs like this, for example, and dungeon tiles, which are printed back there. And the minifigs and dungeon tiles were for our show. The dungeon tiles are really cool, and I have time, so I'm going to pull some out. I like to do this like every stream or two. There are stone ones like this, made out of, to make it look like stone. These are cut stone. There's rough stone as well. This one happens to have an integrated fire sigil, and these are painted to look like wood with stucco walls. And the cool thing about these is that they're all printed on the PLA printers back there. The walls and the floors are a single piece, so they're very, very sturdy. And underneath this plate are ball magnets, and so they adhere to each other magnetically. You don't need a special base or anything, but you can, they are really pretty sturdy. As you can see, you can move them around pretty easily and rearrange them quickly. And we have special features, not just like the sigil, but also operating doors. Okay. So that when we are actually in a dungeon, like this could be a warehouse or a tavern or other wooden stucco walled structure. Okay. They're painted on both sides, including the outside, so that we have street tiles over there. You could be on the street, walking along the street, and you'd see the finished side of the building, and then you walk in the door and get ambushed, because that's what the DM would do to you. So relaxing painting started because these needed to be painted. Like these needed to be primed and then base coated and then washed and then stucco detail painted, that kind of thing. And we started just streaming that because why not? Well, once we ran out of dungeon tiles to do our minifigs, I started building models, and that's why Submarine Wednesday was going on for a long, long time until that was actually completed about a month ago. And now I'm working on this amazing Apollo model. Slowly but surely making progress on it. It doesn't look like much. That's the progress. But this goes on here. Okay. And these doors go on here. And once that's done, which could be as soon as next week, if I get the stuff, the rest of this done on Wednesday, the little black parts in there and the taping, I can paint this, attach the rocket nozzles to the inside of this and attach it to that, and the escape module, the escape tower, will be finished. And that would be one of the components of the model, which I will show you on the instruction sheet. And then I will continue working on the module. And these components here, which I finished mostly on Friday and just finished assembly today, are parts that go on the inside of the service module, which for display purposes has little doors that open up so you can see the fuel cells and the oxygen tanks and the hydrogen tank and the fuel for the rocket. Okay, the rocket motor. This all kind of fits together. It's a little bit delayed because I'm trying to get the right color paint. The inside of this, the whole inside of this gets painted gold. It really is. I don't know if it was gold plated or whatever, but it has to do with heat exchange. But the outsides of it get painted a light green color, and I have not been able to find the right color. And then there's detail like cables and things that need to be painted on there. So I've got the gold paint now, so I can get these parts prepped. They're sitting over there on the box top. I can get them prepped so that they end up looking like this. Okay, I'm going to have to test fit this. I'm just looking at the instructions. So this gets all put together, and then these parts get cemented in. Hopefully they'll actually fit. But the fuel tank, which is supposed to go in here, is inserted after this is put together. If it fits tightly, you won't be able to get it in. So I don't know. I'm going to have to play around with that. I'm thinking this all needs to be maybe assembled at the same time. It would be nice to be able to assemble this so that it could be painted, but we'll see. Then there's some additional detail on the inside of the panel that opens up. These little bits, I have 2 of the 4. 2 of the 4 I know where they are. The other 2 I don't know where they are, and this part is out and about somewhere. I'll have to dig that up. Finding parts is a major issue. And then we got the attitude control rockets that attach to the outside of the service module, and there's 4 of these components. So these are amazingly tiny. I know they are because a couple of them have broken off of the sprues, and I was able to find them. Hopefully I'll be able to find all 16 of them. If not, I'll be fabricating them. These will get painted the black on the inside and steel on the outside, just like all of the other rocket nozzles. Okay, like this. Black on the inside, steel on the outside. I'm not sure. I have to look at the box top to see what color this is supposed to be. The thing to which they attach. I'm not sure if that's painted. I think it's painted the same glossy white as the whole outside is. I'm not sure. Find out. So these components, I need to find these components and paint them, glue them together, get rid of the seams, paint them aluminum. Those won't get attached until this whole thing is painted. This is painted gold on the bottom and light green on the top, because this is painted light green on the top and it has to match that. There's just things that have to do with that. Oh, this is the hinge. Okay. I don't know. Once when I start playing around with these pieces and test fitting it, then I guess I'll be able to see what's going on. It looks like this part and this part are cemented on, and then this part is the part that's hinged and opens up, because it says no cement. Part number 52, which is 52 and 53, these two get cemented on to 15, but you don't have cement. Oh, okay. I don't know. It's not clear. This is the kind of instruction you get. Cement 52 and 53 to 15, which means these two to this, right? And then this whole assembly, what is 52 and 53 again, is not glued on to 16, which is hinged. So I'm going to be test fitting a lot of stuff before it gets painted and all. Yeah, so what's going to happen is that on Wednesday, okay, I am going to paint the insides of this black, do a little bit of sanding on this again, tape it up and get it ready. This, and that, all ready for final painting. The semi-gloss kind of pearl white. And then hopefully be able to not have problems with the detail. I am then also going to start prepping these parts and test fitting all of this to see how it will work. Get the final sanding of these done and get them ready to be, well, I can prime this one between now and Wednesday. I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to go ahead and prime this so that I can paint it silver. I mean, aluminum, really. It's going to be painted aluminum. I'm going to prime this, which is the trellis part of the escape tower. So I'll prime those 2 bits tomorrow so that they're done. Okay. And then this will just have to wait until Wednesday to get final sanding done. paint the insides of those, tape them, get that ready for final painting so that the entire escape tower, these things too, these need to be painted. So like on Thursday, after I get some of these other little detail bits done, like the taping and the painting of the black part there, I'm talking to myself so I know what I'm doing. It doesn't mean I'll remember what I'm doing on Wednesday, but it's what I'm planning to do is prime this, prime that between now and Wednesday. Wednesday, paint these early on, okay? Clean up anything that needs to be cleaned up and tape them so that these parts, the doors and this and that, can all be painted the pearl white maybe on Thursday. And then Friday, I might be able to do the final assembly of the escape tower. That might be done. That would be pretty cool to get that done. And on Wednesday, I can probably paint this because I'm going to prime this. There's that. Also on Wednesday, I'm going to finish sanding this so that this can be primed and then painted. And I'm going to start prepping these parts and test fitting them to see how that works. And then doing these little bits, finding these little bits of parts. And maybe I'm not going to bother priming these little nozzles. I might even begin to paint them, depending on how, at least the control attitude nozzles. So eventually, the service module, okay, oh yeah, here's more parts. Folding antenna, the high gain antenna, okay. Eventually, this will get done, I guess. Okay, I'm a little bit confused by this now. Color is E. Okay, I'm a little confused because this looks like it covers that. So why paint the detail of that if it gets covered? Maybe it doesn't get covered. Let me look at the instructions. Oh yeah, that's going to be touchy. This is supposed to fold up and down. So this part gets cemented to that without getting any cement on this. That's tricky. So it says to cement all of these attitude control rockets to the outside. That makes sense. But then don't cement I don't know why, but this is not cemented to that. Like it can come off later. You know, I'm not, like I was saying, why paint the detail here when you're just going to cover it up? But it's covered up in a way that it uncovers. Part 58 does not get cemented to this assembly. I don't know why it's designed to come off, because in spaceflight it doesn't. The very end, the rocket nozzle gets cemented onto this outer thing. You have to find all the parts. Anyway, that's why this takes a while, because, you know, I don't really know what I'm doing, and I'm trying to find parts, and it goes slowly, and sometimes there's an oops, and sometimes there isn't. So far, there hasn't been a huge oops yet. It's kind of a surprise, but we'll see. So what I need to do is remember to prime this and prime the trellis part of the escape tower. I think I should prime it before I do the final coat on it. I'm tempted not to, but I think I will. And then on Wednesday, I can paint this, the tank, and get this ready, get this and all of the other bits that go into the escape tower ready for final painting. And then there'll just be little bits of things to be done at the end, like painting this tiny little dot black without making a mess of anything else. And then getting these doors cemented on somehow. We'll see. I might end up using contact cement for that because it'll grip without spoiling the paint, the surface of the paint, and allows me to maneuver things. And it eventually hardens. Like this whole thing is done with the contact cement, and that holds up pretty well. Yeah, so that's it for tedious sanding with Dyson Dungeons. I'm going to cover this box up because I don't want these parts to get messy. I don't need to bother with these because they need to be thoroughly washed before they're primed and finished sanding. What I can do, okay, is I'm missing two parts here. So this is what I'm going to do with the last remaining moments. The last remaining moments of this stream is I'm going to attempt to find the other two parts. These are 51 and 47. Okay, so I've got half of each of these, and I'm missing the other half. This is a nice this part here, 49, is just like this little the dot. It's a dot that's supposed to be cemented in somewhere. That's going to get lost somehow. And then this is, can't really read it. 50. Yeah, 59. This is the part that holds the antenna. Anyway, let me go part hunting. What the heck? I need to find those two parts. Those parts are going to be in one of these containers, I hope, right? Because these are containers of little parts. Oh, and here, this one, I'm pretty sure. No, that's not it. I thought it was the high gain antenna, but it's not. Yeah, all these parts just fell off the sprues. I mean, these are struts from the lunar module. These are 3 of the 4 landing pads. These are antenna that are not what I'm looking for. Okay, so that's not it. Those are trash. Okay. I think those are them. This is the 4th one. These are 2 of the 16. These attitude control rockets here. They are stupidly small. It's going to be a real pain to work with. Here are 2 of them. These are, I don't know what those are, but they look important, so I'll save those. This looks like some sort of hatch. This looks like something that broke off of something. Oh my, that might be an issue. Okay, these are these are the other halves. These are the back halves of these two. Okay. So these two parts are really important because they are the other half of those. So what I'm looking at here, and I'm really afraid this is what happened, is I think this little bit here, I think that's the part of the high gain antenna. This isn't the high gain antenna. I'll have to find it. But if that broke off, that's going to be an issue, a significant issue of fixing, of needing fixing. I mean, it's supposed to rotate, right? It's supposed to be hinged, and this almost certainly looks like the stem of that, like in the bouncing around of parts where parts got busted off of sprues. Which I knew. It looks like that. That looks like the high gain antenna. And it looks like in the bouncing around process, this broke off. Yeah, that did. So that's going to have to be, that's going to have to really be solidly cemented. You want to look around and make sure that there isn't another another thing like this, but that's definitely that part, which you can't see. Let me cap this up and it goes lost. This is really badly molded. It's just flashing all over the place. But yeah, this broke off. And it's supposed to be solid so that it swings up and down. Okay, well, that's going to be a challenge. What color is E? E is silver. Okay, so that's just going to be painted one of the aluminum colors after I fix that. Yeah, delicate parts. Delicate. Yeah, and apparently the way this works is that this, which is supposed to be attached to that, and eventually will be, slides in here like this, and then it folds flat and then opens up. Okay, well that'll be a reconstitution challenge, or a reassembly, making it firm. Hopefully, it'll be one of those things where the cement makes the joints stronger than the original. Hope so, anyway. And I hope that I can find the other, since there are two of them in here. There better still be two in here. Those little rocket nozzles, yeah, two. I'm hoping that the other 14 of these, I've got two of them, that the other 14 of these incredibly tiny little things are still on the sprue and I can find them. Okay, well, that's what I'm going to be doing on Wednesday. Besides fretting about fixing this, getting these cleaned up and attached, I might just go ahead and take these apart, cement them together, and clean them up so that the seams don't show, right? At least cement them on Wednesday and get them ready to be painted. Get this primed, get the other thing primed, paint this, finish prepping this inside and out, and painting this black blob here, there, and taping it so that it looks good. Making progress, slowly, very slowly, but just like with the submarine, it looks like nothing is happening, and then eventually it does. So I'm hoping the same thing happens here, that eventually it looks like something is happening. Today, there's not much to show, but, I got to do some filing and sanding. Maybe a little bit more on Wednesday. Well, we'll see. Thanks for watching. I will be back on Wednesday at more or less 10 in the morning, and we'll continue to be plugging away at these bits of the Apollo model. Thanks so much, and see you then.